All right, we are coming to you live from an undisclosed location atop the Rocky Mountains in the beautiful Pacific Northwest of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Darkwolf's Den. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and get this paused real quick. At least we know it's working. Anyway, this is Darkwolf's Den, and I am Dark Wolf. Guys, we have a very special episode for you today. We have I haven't done an In the Den since last year, so this is, I believe, is the first one I've done all year. We have In the Den with a very special guest, a guest that I've been wanting to get on for quite a while on this channel. He's got some amazing information. The way he thinks just really opens up my mind every time I listen to his show. Guys, without any further ado, here is Mr. SMQ AI. Thanks for joining us, SMQ.
Hi, great. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate you asking me on.
It's both a pleasure and an honor to have you here, sir. So, we are going to go into an interview real quick. I don't know how long it's going to last. I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask this man. I've been really looking forward to this. So let me start out with something simple. Before the Mandela effect, were you really a researcher into a lot of the paranormal things?
Before the Mandela effect, I was interested in those kinds of things. And if I start breaking up, just let me know and I'll try to adjust it, because we had some issues yesterday we can get into. But as far as the paranormal goes, I was always interested. If it was on TV, like Nat Geo or something like that, or Ghost Hunters, sure, of course I was interested. But in terms of being someone who is actively into it, in terms of pursuing it the way that I'm pursuing the Mandela effect, no, nothing like this at all whatsoever. Now I was interested passively as well into the conspiracy world. All the normal conspiracies, JFK and all that kind of stuff. But even that was just a passing sort of interest. I didn't become sort of active or really get into it like I am with this until the Mandela effect, affected me personally.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. Yeah, when I first found Mandela effect, I'd been studying paranormal, conspiracies, and you name it, since I was 12 years old. So when I found the Mandela effect, it was more fascination than anything to me.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So yesterday, for those who don't know, guys, him and Chick Mandela Effect channel, have a show on SMQ's channel called The Lost and Found Bin. Yesterday, they had a whole bunch of issues. You want to tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, it's really strange. We were talking about the subject was the Mandela effect community itself, and what the sort of the static that we were seeing within the community. And this was before we came up with the idea of sort of forecasting like quantum storms for the Mandela effect, but and shifts and things of that nature. But we usually talk about the effect itself, and we don't really address the community. And we were noticing some prominent people were disagreeing, and we were just noticing that, because in each of our lives we had noticed that there were kind of staticky things going on in our own lives that was sort of raising the tension. And we noticed that since the shift about early to mid last week, the tension has been steadily rising all around us, and it was like this wave and this storm. And that's where I think Chick actually came up with kind of that terminology, but it was like this these like a forecast. And we were talking before about having kind of themes for shifts, and certain things or certain colors or affecting certain geo areas or something like that each shift. But now I think we're also going to incorporate sort of how it makes people feel, whether you're physically sick, whether it's causing static in your relationships, whether loved ones are acting differently. There's a whole host of things since we talked yesterday that we could open up. But in the process of doing all of those things, I was having the worst static and the worst. My channel was breaking up, and I couldn't get it back. And I've had issues before on a really small scale, but I could usually get it back like really fast. And this one, it just would not come back. And at one point it dropped me completely and I had to get back on. So it got really strange. And And like you said, like you had said before the show, we must be over the target or near it, because whatever it was, it did not want a smooth show, and whatever it was, it certainly accomplished that.
I think it did its best to accomplish it. It kind of cut the show early, I think, a little bit earlier than you guys had planned. But generally speaking, it started out crackly, and then it went great. And then right there at the end, when you guys really got to talking about the community and how things had really kind of starting to get riled up. And I noticed that in all the communities I'm in the last week or so, everybody's gotten riled up. They're at each other's throats. There's just this weird energy, and we had an incident in the chat room in your show yesterday where, you had even said, hey, let's look for, let's see if anybody gets trolly or any craziness happens. We'll be ready for it. And lo and behold, there was a crazy misunderstanding in the chat, which I think you guys handled both maturely and brilliantly.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, now that we talk about synchronicities and we've incorporated that sort of into our ethos, but both Chick and I, we now know, okay, look, once we've grappled onto a theme, we know that we can almost predict, not predict like Nostradamus predict, but almost in like a forecast. And that's why we came up with that term, almost like a weather forecast. If you have high pressure, you get, a certain kind of, if you have low pressure, and you can just sort of gauge that pressure. And we knew that we had pretty high pressure going into this thing. So, that's why we brought that up. So it was on the record if that were to happen. And sure enough, it did happen. So I think it's about like leveling up. It's about opening up. It's about understanding what it is. And it's about the biggest thing that Chick and I are trying to do together, and then each of us separately, is trying to develop sort of what we're doing is kind of linguistic tools in order to capture exactly what's happening to all of us. So we have something tangible to say, okay, we predicted this. We knew this was going to happen. So therefore, if you're friends with someone in the Mandela effect community and you have an argument, you can say, look, we're in the middle of this storm. So let's take a step back, because we're not, we're in the middle of this thing, and we're reacting to it. I'm sure you've heard before, human beings are just like big batteries. We're
Right.
yeah, yep. So anyway,
Yeah, we're the brain's an antenna, and the rest of us are a great big electrostatic battery.
yep, exactly.
So you've mentioned it a couple of times. If you would go ahead and explain to our audience exactly what you mean by shift themes.
Yeah. Well, everyone, I assume are they talk about they understand what shifts are. I'm
Right.
assuming.
Yeah, everybody in this channel would definitely understand what a shift means.
Okay, excellent. So and early on, when I noted, I would notice a theme, and what I was talking about is people would immediately from the different channels would begin talking about either geo themes, and it would come out in bursts, or they would talk about a certain color or a certain geo themes or body changes. And I was trying to figure out whether it was, okay, someone prominent said it, then everyone else is saying the same thing. But and I kept my mouth shut about it for a while, but then I started noticing other people were talking about the same thing, but it was different things they were pointing out. Like waves with the movies, or waves with the geo changes, or waves with behavior, or waves with body changes. They don't seem to come out very piecemeal. I've noticed it seems to be people are noticing, oh, there's 6 drill holes in our skull, and then in the same week someone will notice that our liver has changed. And these are 2 separate channels, and even if they're talking to one another, they've decided to bring up 2 separate things unless everybody's colluding and I'm not part of it. I mean, it seems to me to be like almost like a wave. If you really see kind of like the meta feeling of the ME movement, it's like in waves, like an ocean.
Absolutely. And I've been saying that for quite a while, that this whole thing seems to move in waves. We get new groups of people in waves. We get new Mandela effects in waves. And when you start talking about themes quite a while back, I guess now, it really kind of clicked and really meant something to me, because we've had the color themes, we've had the art themes, we've had the space themes, we've had, like you were saying, body themes. It's really intriguing to me. It's almost as if something is behind it, an actual hand behind it, behind the scenes, moving things around.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's why, some of the things I talk about is I think I'm to the point where I think it's some kind of conscious entity or it's something conscious. And I'm only using the word entity because I don't have the language yet because we're all figuring this out together in real time. But I think it's something real. And I don't think that this is natural in a sense that it's leaves falling off a tree because that's what naturally happens. I think this is something that's being directed, and it's something that is conscious, that we're aware of it, and it's aware of us. And once we've acknowledged that we're aware of it, you end up like leveling up in a way, and you start seeing the bigger and bigger synchronicities in your life, and you also start to notice the things that happen in your life. Like almost that car accident for me was almost like a foreshadowing of the static that we're seeing right now. I saw a very bad car accident, I think a week or two ago, and that was before this shift. And that was the beginning of this dark period that we're kind of in, where everybody's at each other's throats and everyone's upset. And I don't mean just in the Mandela effect community, it's even on my Twitter feed, people are arguing. And so it's all over the place. So that's why I always say I think the Mandela effect community, I think everybody's Mandela affected. You just have to like notice it or something. Something has to click inside of you, like a switch has to go off in order for you to go, okay, I'm now with this group of people called the Mandela effect people, and I understand what they're saying now. Otherwise, it's more or less a novelty thing, and most people move on from it. But once you have that personal connection to it, and something kind of freaks you out a little bit, that's when you start to really get into it, like what happened to all of us, I assume.
Right. Um, I like the Let me try that again. I like what you're saying there about that. Totally lost the train of thought where I was going with that particular. So, Boltzmann brains leading along this line of thinking. Tell us about the Boltzmann brains and what those are, and what you found out about that.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most absurd, a little obscene, but absurd things I've ever heard of in my entire life. If you look up Bozeman brains and you'll get a wiki page on it, and really that's about as much time as you probably need to spend on it. Apparently, yeah, right. There's apparently a theory out there, and it's so absurd, it's almost embarrassing to explain that brains that are aware of themselves can magically form in space, and those brains can be aware of themselves. And the leaders of our scientific community, which ultimately is actually the true leaders of this planet, because the people who own and lead the technology and decide what goes and what stays truly are the leaders. It's a theocracy. Scientism is a theocracy. So the priests of this theocracy actually believe in the upper echelons that brains are forming against all odds in the outside ether, out in space. I mean, you can look it up. These aren't things I'm making up. It's so absurd. And it also, why I talked about it was, one, it was absurd, but I wanted to sort of highlight that these are the learned minds from MIT and the best, scientific right institutions. And to even entertain a theory like this just shows you the willingness of scientists. It's either gullibility or it's like an inside joke saying we'll believe the most outlandish things, and these rubes that bow down to everything that we say as we laugh at their ignorance, they'll just have to accept it. And in the background, as long as they don't find out that we believe that brains are forming in space against all odds, I mean, it sounds like bad sci-fi, frankly. It's not even good sci-fi.
It really does. When you brought that up, I just had to go look into the concept myself, and I spent about an hour on it before I went, no, no. The probability of this happening, Boltzmann brain is what it's called. Boltzmann, Boltzmann brain, for those asking in chat. Um, it's the probability of it happening is about the highest probability is a room full of monkeys typing out the complete works of Shakespeare on a computer.
Yes. Yes. Well said. Exactly right.
It is ridiculous at best. Um, so let's go back to the basics just a little bit on the Mandela effect. I have to ask you, I ask every guest, what was your first Mandela effect? What really snagged you to went, oh God, there's something here?
For me, I'd watched Mandela Effect videos because I was, into conspiracy stuff. And although I've come to the conclusion that the Mandela Effect is not a conspiracy because there's no one conspiring to change existence. But anyhow, but that's my personal belief.
Right.
Um, I had watched a couple of the videos and I kind of shrugged, and it was it had a novelty to it. And I thought it was just going to be some sort of YouTube fad. And then I remember that Sally Field speech, you like me, you really, really like me. And I remember that because when I was a kid, my mom was a Sally Fields fan. And of course, we had HBO. And if a Sally Fields movie was on, well, the whole family was going to watch the Sally Field movie. So I was quite, aware of her work. I mean, I'm talking The Flying Nun, Gidget, all everything Sally Field I knew about. And I remember my mom even, in jest and in conversation, bringing that speech up, and and everybody would laugh and giggle. And then I remember it was being brought up by Madonna, it was brought up by Jim Carrey, and throughout our pop culture, it's been brought up time and time again, that speech, because it made her very endearing. She said, "You like me, you really, really like me," and it was like a real moment, and you could tell she was really speechless, and it was. It was a big moment for her, and it meant a lot to her. And you could see that she wasn't acting, because people
Right.
say yeah, people say really silly things when they're really, really excited. And that was a really great moment. But then I saw that video where she said, you like me right now. And the wording was so clunky and so strange and so bizarre. And then eventually I heard that someone that was actually at that Oscar performance actually said, no, she said, you like me, you really, really like me. What and this person had said, what I see on video isn't what happened. It personally touched me because I remember my family saying that. I remember all these stars and people of note, people, that's their job, that's their industry. They're around those kinds of things all day. You know, they have the ability to watch B-reel and footage, and they have access to things in Hollywood that we don't have access to. So for them to get it wrong, and for everyone that I've ever known to get that wrong, it seems like a small thing, but for me, because it was from my childhood, it kind of freaked me out.
Right.
So
And that's one thing I've noticed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did.
okay,
Um,
it's okay.
That's one thing I've noticed with the Mandela effect, especially to a lot of us that are really affected. It's like certain things that have become memes in our life. Like the Berenstain Bears was mine. I learned to read on that book. That was a thing for me. I learned everything about that book. I remember asking my mother if if Americans were saying the word right, Steen or Stein. I'd like to think she'd have said, son, there's an A there. However, she told me it depends on what country you're in. Fair enough. It's like certain memes in our lives are what ends up Mandela effect. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense, because I'm sure to other people who don't have that personal connection to what you're talking about, and that personal connection to what I'm talking about, is thinking, wow, you're blowing something really out of proportion. But they don't understand, you're dealing with our lives, and something like you said, it was a meme in our life, and now it's become a meme, after the Mandela effect. So, it's for some, some children are affected by different things in different ways. And this is just something that, like, you were affected with, and it's something I'm affected with. And that's why I don't proselytize. I don't try to convince people the
Right.
Mandela effect is real, because I'm convinced it has to, almost, you have to be chosen, or you have to sort of, do the Alice in Wonderland and fall through the rabbit hole. Something has to click inside of you internally for you to go, yes, this is a real thing. Because otherwise, it sounds like you're getting tripped up on really minor trivia, but they don't understand that it's something big.
Exactly. Exactly. And I was trying to explain it to somebody the other day. I was literally asked to explain it to someone. And the examples I give, they're like, well, isn't that just kind of nitpicky? Aren't you just kind of picking stuff apart like the Bible? Yeah, some of it does seem really trivial. A lot of it does. But then again, a lot of it doesn't either. If it's something that really meant something to you, something 110% you to bet your next breath on, it's not trivial anymore to you.
Yeah, and what personalizes it and they don't understand is that my mom, she made that speech part of, like, sometimes she would say it and it would make people laugh. So it was something that was personal to me. It was something that was there and part of my childhood. So it's for that to be gone, I don't think people, well, other than us, you and me, and those of us in the in me community, that really, it's really messing with our heads. I don't think they get. You've taken something from your narrative, your life's narrative, and you've edited it, and you've done it without our permission, and you've taken something away, and you've made us kind of double look and question reality, and it's very unnerving until you can get a hold of yourself and master the fear. It can be very unnerving.
Absolutely, that it can. And a lot of people I used to hear stories about they'd be sitting on the couch for 3 days, bundled up in a ball, just rocking back and forth. Oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? I can understand that. But to me, it was always like fascinating. Oh my God, what is this?
Mhm.
Um, Continuing along this, from your research, and I know you've been researching this for quite a while, how long has it been occurring, in your opinion?
That's a great question because now I'm starting to open up where things that have happened in the past. I'm just now beginning to think that perhaps these are Mandela effects because I'm thinking the Mandela effect is versions of reality slipping into one another. And I don't know and it's called, I think it's like in computer science, they have cascading changes or a cascading failure where you have a failure at the top and like a domino, it hits the other dominoes at the bottom and you have a cascading failure. I think something happened somewhere in some version of reality, perhaps our own. There was a change or there was a failure somewhere. And now, whatever we are, as independent beings, we're slipping through these different versions of reality that are similar but are different. And where it started, I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you. And again, this time next year, I'll probably have a better handle on it. But it's other things like that bother people, like the Paul is dead movement. I had did a video on that too.
Mhm.
People thinking Paul McCartney died in the '60s, and this is a second Paul. Well, what if this is a Mandela effect? What if a lot of the things that we've considered in the past to be part of normal conspiracy culture and the things that don't seem to add up, what if they too are also Mandela effects? And by Mandela effects, I mean quantum effects. We're really ultimately talking about things changing at the smallest subatomic level and then cascading upward to the levels that we communicate and we exist at and the frequencies that we exist at. So for me, I'm starting to look into, you hear about all these anomalies like the man from Turid, which, or is it
Torrid, the man from Torrid.
Torrid?
I love
Thank
that
you.
story.
Man from Torrid was, that's the 1950s. That's pretty far back. That's even before Paul is dead. So, are we talking that far back? Or if you let go of the linear concept of time, did something change and now it can cascade outwards from the present into all directions, including the future and the past, which is what I subscribe to. So we could see more cascading changes and anomalies showing up in the past, in quote real time, in quote the present. So that could be something that's going to be interesting to look out for. And then as we educate ourselves and build a vocabulary around the Mandela effect with forecasting, with themes, forecasting, and things like that, we can start. If we can build a template, we could start to look at anomalies in the past and put our templates over top of that and say, sort of like almost like MUFON does. Okay, do 4 or 5 of these things match up? And if so, then we can go from not likely to probable to definite Mandela effect. You know, there's a whole a systematic list of things we could go through potentially if we all really stuck to it, and if we stayed banded together and not fracture off like other communities do.
Absolutely. And that is so key. Keeping the community banded together. Yeah, we're not all going to get along with each other every second of every day. But if we can just let the little stuff go and remember we're here for a much, much bigger picture, and this is a call to the community, by the way. If we can realize that we might not always agree with something somebody says or feel hurt, but there's so much more going on here. Just because somebody hurt your feelings doesn't mean just give it up and run away. Delve deeper into the Mandela effect theories or things like that. So I want to put that out there after all the animosity that's been in the community this week. Um, or synchronicities. Let's get into that for a little bit. And there's a story I want to ask you about here shortly, also. But starting off, do you have any number synchronicities or any other syncs that are pretty common for you?
Yeah, my number synchronicities are low right now, but they ramp up either before, during, or after a shift, and that's something that I personally know is one of my indicators, as well as the tinnitus in my ears, the ringing in my ears. Those are the two indicators. But yeah, I have, like, right now it's pretty low with I'll see repeating numbers maybe once in a day, if that. But whenever we all are about to shift and we're about to move up or whatever it is, the repeating numbers come at me constantly, whether it's repeating numbers in papers I see, repeating numbers in the clock, repeating numbers in average conversation where someone has to say numbers, like
Right.
777 or something like that. And it's always, now to me, it jumps out to me because now that I'm aware of it, and I think it's aware of me, it can be more blatant with things jumping out. And that goes back to my pet theory. And this isn't a prescription for everyone. This is just me thinking that this is something conscious. And now it's either communicating with me and I'm communicating back with it, or it's still a one-way street where I'm watching it, but now I'm able to really pay attention to those signs. And but yeah, synchronicities, and they still happen to me in all kinds of different ways. Really strange. Like I had a conversation with someone the other day, and and I forgot exactly what the subject was for, and I don't remember if it was controversial or not. But it wasn't anything pressing on the news. I'm trying to remember what it was. It wasn't anything pressing on the news or anything. And then the very next day, it was in the Bing trending section of Bing, and it hadn't been in the news in a very, very long time. And
Right.
now I've had someone tell me, well, they're listening into you, so they decided to put it on your being in the trending section, and yeah, that's absolutely something that can be the case. So what I look for is other synchronicities, like what Chick and I brought up is we were sort of laughing at the Mandela effect and saying it was a kind of trolling us and we were making light of it and everything. And then, one of the easiest ways to trigger me are car accidents. And sure enough, that next week, what happened? I witnessed that car accident. And since that car accident, we've shifted into a more kind of, what we're talking about. Everybody's more tense and we're squabbling amongst ourselves. I'm not saying I caused that. My point is that I'm
Right.
giving you examples of those synchronicities that they don't always have to be numeric. They don't always have to be a repeating 222. They don't have to, synchronicities can be very abstract and they can only make sense sometimes to the person experiencing those synchronicities. But I can tell you, if the Mandela effect isn't sentient, if it's not aware of itself, it's that was one heck of a coincidence for me to make light of it. And then it sort of showed me, don't push me too much with that car accident, meaning I felt no trespassing. I felt warning. I felt just deep. It's almost deep in my spiritual self, my higher self, my soul, however you want to put it. It was communicating very plainly to me that I needed to back off, and I listened to it, and now I take it very seriously. And in a way, I'm me even talking to you about this. Take it seriously because we were laughing at it, and I don't think that that's very wise.
And everybody do take that under consideration. I have ever since I heard him speaking about that on his channel. Now, you mentioned another time that you, like right before that, within that same week, that you had challenged fate or the Mandela effect or the entity that may be. and you were talking about the moon. There was the little metal art piece on the moon, and you said, "What are we going to have next? A museum up there?" And lo and behold, Andy Warhol's now on the moon. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it's a museum on the moon. You can I can't believe I'm saying this. You can Google it. Andy Warhol is he's on the moon, man. With five or six other of his contemporaries at the time. And yeah, it's basically there. What how it came about was we were talking about the a potential Mandela effect of there being a memorial on the moon for all the astronauts that were lost. And you would think that this would be all in our history books because one thing people love to do is pay homage and give talk about memorials to whoever was lost in a great cause. And the moon mission, we lost a lot of astronauts, and part of that we've lost two cosmonauts on the Russian side. So this was like a human endeavor to go to the moon. And now there is a plaque and a memorial on the moon that they put up there. And you would think that would be plastered everywhere, and it's not. It was never talked about. And in fact, if you now this may be a Mandela effect. If you had wikied it 2 weeks ago when we were talking about it, it was literally just one page, and it looked like it was just slapped together real quick because people were aware of it now. And we were noting how quickly this scene, the background was assembling. It was almost like it was put there, it was being noticed, and then a background was assembling around it, and people were finally noticing it. And there's a memorial on the moon. You would think that would be one of the most famous memorials on the planet. Like it would be the biggest thing on the around
Right.
because it's the only thing off the earth that's a memorial. But no one knows about it. So we made the side comment of what's going to happen next, and we mentioned the museum, we mentioned water parks, and sure enough, now what happened? Andy Warhol's on the moon. They somehow smuggled art pieces on, during those Apollo missions. They smuggled the art pieces, and there's art on the moon now. In fact, unless you live in a really major urban area with a very state of the art museum, there's more art on the moon than most of the country.
Oh
Think
wow.
just think of it that way. There's Andy Warhol is on the moon, and think of how many Andy Warhols are in New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago or Seattle. The really mega cities. Now think about that. Unless you're in cities that size, you have no way of going to see an Andy Warhol. Well, the moon has an Andy Warhol, so it has more it's more art on it than most communities on Earth have. You know how strange that sounds? You know how bizarre that is?
Yeah, I know how bizarre it was the first time I heard you say it, and every time I think about it since, it don't add up.
It
I've
doesn't.
tried and I've tried and I've tried to make it make sense, and there's not a reality in which I can make that make sense.
Yeah, but it's real. And the thing I love about it is we brought up the water parks, and I think it was Chick who brought up the water parks, and she sent me a wiki on, yeah, now there's water on the moon. There's water all over the lunar surface. Yes, there's water on the moon now.
Now,
There's
are we
lakes.
talking like minuscule crystal, like just in the dirt, or are we talking like freaking lakes?
I think lakes. I don't know what size lakes, but yeah, we're talking lakes. And that's why I love Google is, there's no disputing it. You just go Google it, or if you don't trust Google, you use Bing or use Yahoo, but it's there. There is yeah, there's water on the moon now. And I think the title of the wiki is the lakes of the moon, and they've actually named them now. They have names.
You
So
heard it here first, guys.
yeah. So it's very strange. It's very odd. So yeah, we backed off and we're now taking these things very seriously. And I've pulled back any predictions or anything else that seem outlandish because I don't know, and that's just the thing is it's so personalized. It may not click with other people or they may already know, but to us we freak out about it. And that's the mystery of the Mandela effect, like you and I were talking about. These seems to be, it seems to be minor things that get you and I revved up, and to someone else, if it's not personalized, they're just saying, "So what? Andy Warhol's on the moon. Who cares?"
Right. Exactly. Um, Keeping along this theme of the synchronicities, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. If you could both give us a brief explanation of that and tell us your crazy synchronicity having to do with that, because I think that's such an incredible story.
Sure. Yeah, we Chick and I were talking about the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and my fear of this is that because the way the syndrome is described is it's people not perceiving ultimately, and this is me just really just butchering it. So you can Google it yourself for the wiki on that, but it's ultimately people just not perceiving reality correctly, and it's usually with misshapen things, perceptions of things being closer or farther away than they really are, the size of themselves, the size of people in terms of like their height. And it's basically has to do with like what the Mandela effect is perception. And we were talking about it, we were afraid that that could be one of the labels that could be applied to the community. And we were talking about, you know, the danger of the Mandela effect community is it's not a conspiracy. And that's one of the great things about it is we're talking about physical changes that are happening in the environment. Now we can debate whether or not the source of that is CERN, and that's a legitimate conspiracy. But the fact that it actually exists, that's not a conspiracy. You either believe it or you don't. There's no debating about, these kinds of things. There's no point in debating them. So what we were worried about was, if this thing got big enough and we really got this thing rolling and more people, like you said it perfectly, they come in waves, new people that are affected. You can tell we had a new wave about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you can see all these new MEs. They're all discovering the stuff that we all discovered 3, 4, 5 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. And you can see these new channels cropping up, this new wave of new MEs, and it comes in waves. And what if this thing got big enough to where they had to diagnose it? We said one of the easiest ways to do it is with something that is a pre-existing condition, such as the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. And then what was really freaked me out is I did a visit to Philadelphia. I think it was a week later. I think it was just a week later, and I was there for like 4 or 5 days, I think. And I just decided to go into this the MUTTER. I think it's called the Muter Museum, and I decided to go in and check it out. And it just sounded interesting because it had cadavers and all kinds of other things. And I also wanted to check the skulls. But the first thing that I saw when you walk in sort of the lobby there is it starts to explain the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Now, out of all the museums, out of all the places that I've walked into, and it was a week later, so it was still fresh in my mind. That was my first beginning of me going, this thing is paying attention to me. This thing, you know, this thing is in some way or another, I'm telegraphing information and it's sending it back to me. And when that idea blossomed in my head, that's whenever with the car wreck, I was able to, sort of level up. I was able to understand that perhaps there is modes of communication. It's just not verbal. And if you listen to your spirit and what it's saying to you, and you can sort of understand what's being communicated. And if you do that, then you start to understand there are forces in the universe in our existence that are beyond us. I'm not a materialist, and I've never claimed to be. And because of that, these things shouldn't be toyed with, especially if you don't understand them. And certainly I don't understand them. So that's where I get my respect and I backed off. But yeah, that was the beginning. That was my first step toe in the sun of understanding that this thing was listening to me and it was responding to me. And that was a major synchronicity for me.
Gotcha. That I love hearing that story because I like I said, I've been following your shows and whatnot. When you come back from your vacation and told that story, it didn't take much understanding to go, whoa, that's pretty friggin' wild. I'm glad what you said about them trying to use it against us in the community. I've wondered that myself more than once, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and if that's exactly what they would try to do. But I ain't seen it happen yet, luckily.
Yeah, so far so good, but we're not that big yet. It's if we get big enough, it there may be a move. I'm just trying to be preemptive. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just trying to be preemptive that it's a possibility. I'm just, right now it's just basically people observing things that are very strange and we're all talking about it. That's all it is at this point, it seems.
Exactly. If you got your notebook next to you, you want to take down a note, researcher, look into morphogenic fields. We ain't necessarily got to get into it right now, but researcher, you might want to take a look at that. It might be interesting to you.
More morphogenic fields. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Something I've been looking into and was brought to my attention here recently, and I thought this might have some good information in it. So there's your freebie. As a
Wonderful.
theorist, I must ask you: do you support a particular theory?
So far, the only one that I work on is that I'm coming from the place of this is a naturally occurring event. I don't know if there was an actual event that created this and we're having a cascading events, but certainly I do believe, I think it was naturally occurring. I think to say that CERN has the power to do something like that is to kind of bolster mankind's power in the universe. However, I do respect and I do understand when people think it is CERN. I totally respect that. But I do think that this thing is alive, it's thinking, it's real, it's trying to communicate with us for some reason. We need to respect it. I think it's always been there. I think once it knows that you're watching it and it's watching you, that's when things really get ramped up. I think that the synchronicities are how the communications really happen, and I think that there's a potential system for communication for this, and I think it comes in the waves and it comes in the shifts. But my base theory for now that I'm working on, and hey, I can always be convinced otherwise. I'm always willing to listen to someone because I don't know everything. In fact, I don't really know much. I'm willing to listen if someone brings to me something that says that convinces me that mankind caused this or we're living in some kind of prophecy phase. I'm willing to listen to that. But right now, I'm working under the idea that this has always been with us and that if we can get some more tools and some more language, we may be able to go into the past and maybe we could re-diagnose certain situations as Mandela effects, like Amelia Earhart. She just disappeared. What if there was a shift and suddenly she thought she was 100 miles off coast and then it was gone?
Or Flight 19, for that matter, the famous Bermuda Triangle flight.
Absolutely.
I see how we could go back in history and reevaluate some of these under a new set of eyeballs and really come up with a whole different view on things. I liked what you said earlier also about how you think everybody sees the shifts or is affected either way, whether they want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
So do you really think that only certain people are affected, or everybody, or how do you think that really works?
Well, I think the shifts are to reality and the changes are to reality. It's two levels. The changes are to reality. And then I think only people have the switch flipped, so to speak, to understand. The off switch suddenly becomes on, and then you can see them. And then there's possibly that third level where you can actually communicate with it potentially. But I think this is really happening to, you know, objective reality. I think it's actually happening to existence. And we're just noticing. And once you notice, you can't unsee it. And I think it's happened to everybody because I think our world is changing. And that's all it really is. Why I think it's a failure of science. Science has been politicized and bought into, okay, this is how the world is, and we can't allow anything else to creep in. And what if there's a way to quantify this using the scientific method? And I'm saying what if. I think it's a bit more spiritual. I don't think it could happen. But what if you're a hardcore materialist and you could figure that out? You're depriving yourself of probably one of the greatest natural, occurrences in all of existence. And I give the example. Imagine the first people that saw a volcano erupt. and they had no language for that, and they had no one to communicate. It must have been like, you know, you didn't know before that first volcano erupted that Earth could do that, that existence was capable of doing that. That must have been mind shattering. Or the
Oh,
first time you saw a comet come in and blow up something, and you're one of the 4 or 5 survivors of, an entire, area of people. It must have blown your mind that the sky could do that. And you must have been, these people must have been scrambling for, an understanding. What if this is that kind of natural occurrence? And only now can we, with this kind of technology, can we communicate with one another to say that, hey, something is changing in our reality. Who knows?
gotcha. Um, yeah, the volcano one, and I love that you're all about the language too. You always go back to that language and building the new vocabulary. Weird synchronicity I had with that is I had actually started working on the Mandela Effect Beginner's Guide before you started episode 1 of the Life Lost and Found bin, and you guys started doing language definition, and that's pretty much what the beginner's guide was, is a language definition in parts, kind of building up on concepts through the when I get it all done through the chapters. So that was
Sure.
really neat synchronicity for me, as far as like I was thinking about it, I started working on it, then all of a sudden you guys are talking about it.
Yeah. Yep, it's a thing, and I think once it becomes part of our natural lexicon, and we can systematize it more, it just like understanding shifts. You know how big that was for the Mandela Effect community to understand there were shifts that happened. That was a major thing for all of us. And if we can take that to another level and then another level, it could be something that's standard, and then eventually it's something that we can either predict, or it's something that we can say and point out to a lay person to say, this is what you're seeing. And you don't have to tell them it's the Mandela effect. Just get them to first acknowledge it, and then explain what it is. So that's where we should be heading, I think.
Have you had any NPC moments, as far as like telling somebody about the Mandela effect and them doing that weird, creepy stare off, or any kind of weird moments from NPCs, if you will?
Yeah, I early on when I discovered it, I was showing everybody, and virtually everyone. Only one person got really like upset, and I don't have time for this. But most people, yeah, they give you the blank stare, and they either won't acknowledge it, or they'll almost train their eyes or something else on something else in the room or something that's supposed to happen, and completely change the subject. And I've noticed if you keep sticking to it doggedly, they'll either attack you in terms of saying, this is just like you to go off on a tangent or something like that, or they'll say, so what? And that's the most baffling one. But absolutely, for folks that don't know they're affected, NPCs, however you want to categorize them, yeah, sure. But I don't much anymore, because I don't bother talking to anybody anymore, because I'm at the point where I'm pretty sure if you don't see it, you need to see it and learn it on your own. In a lot of ways, that's what makes it so mysterious and so mystical and so interesting, is that you've got to be, I don't know if you're invited. I don't know if I don't know what it is that happens to happen to you that has to happen. But if you just bring this to someone, they're not going to see it. And I'm pretty convinced of that.
Yeah, I've been having pretty good experiences. Luckily, I work with the public, so I get a whole lot of opportunities. Most people I've talked to have been pretty accepting of it. I've only had one or two do the creepy stare, or do the lost in space moment, but uh, even those haven't been rude or crazy or mean to me at all. So I guess I've been really lucky, and I've got quite a few people in my life, like in my reality life, that really are aware of it and know about it and will talk about it. And so I guess I'm, like, compared to the rest of the community, extremely lucky on that note. That said, do you think it's right? Again, you said you don't do it personally, but do you think it's right to wake people up?
I do. I think it's okay, because if it's real, sort of like Chick said, she'd rather know the ugly truth, and that stuck with me. Um, You know, you should get her on sometime if she's willing. She's pretty profound. But
I was going to talk to you after the show to see if I could have you get her for me.
sure. I can, yeah, I can tell, you know, her, and she can listen to this and, you know, make up her own mind. But, yeah, she's pretty profound, and that is true. You know, me personally, I'd rather know the ugly truth. I'd rather know that the volcano is going to explode. You know, some other people may handle it differently. I think it's okay to bring it up. I think it's okay to bring it up to people, and I think it's okay for you to voice your opinion. I think you're screaming into the wind. I think you know, I think it's pointless, but I think it's okay. I think it's all right. If it makes you feel better, you should do it. But I think it's kind of pointless. But yes, I think it's okay.
Okay, now let's go to the flip side of that same question. Do you think there's a way for us as a community to overcome the stigma that's kind of like automatic the moment we say Mandela effect? Hell, the moment we say Mandela, there's a stigma just suddenly appears. Do you think there's a way to overcome that?
Probably not. And I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as saying that this was, you know, this was a real thing, and then they engineered it to sort of, you know, a lot of people are into, like, you know, the CIA and whatever organization does social engineering, and it kind of routes us off in different ways. And, you know, the conspiracy minded could be they knew this existed, so they put a tag on it so it would sort of funnel us away. So no, I don't. I think this probably happened more organically. You know, I think that the problem is, you know, it is something pretty extraordinary. And I think our best bet is what's been happening is you just be open and honest about it. We try to understand it better so that when new waves of people come in and they begin to understand it with us, more and more waves will have the ability to understand much sooner than the earlier waves like us and ones that came before us. And that's sort of passing on that kind of technology to them is sort of our responsibility, is to build a sort of linguistic technology to pass on to people. And that's what our job is. And I think that's really, that goes in sort of the great tradition of human beings. If we develop something, you know, like, you know, something that will help you fish better, or something that will help you hunt better, or whatever it was back in the day, you pass those things on to people that come behind you. And I think that's our responsibility. So I think it's actually a responsibility.
I fully agree. To take care of the next wave of people coming in, the next group asking about it, the next, and that's kind of what I'm focusing on now when I make videos. Is I'm keeping in mind there's people who've been in it for years, like myself. I've been 3 years studying this, and there's people who've been studying it for 3 days. So we need to make content to cater to both those parties, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Yes, it is our responsibility as the older group to take care of the youngers. Absolutely. So let's dig a little deeper now into theory and conjecture. What is your opinion on the flip flops? This is one thing that's just like baffled me as a researcher. I cannot explain them.
Well, I'm thinking with the flip flops, it could be very much that we've just slipped again. We've cascaded into another version of existence. If you believe in the multiverse theory, we've simply slipped into another version of reality. So in theory, this thing could flip flop 10, 20, 30 times. And if it's a subject that's prone to those changes, perhaps sort of like it's the weakest part of the chain. So therefore, that's where all of the changes are going to be. So who knows? Houston, we have a problem, could change to something completely different. You know, Houston, we had a problem. Houston, there is a problem. Houston, what's going on? I mean, you know, that's a potential. So that's the way I think that, at least that's what I'm working under. That's the source. The source is we keep slipping into different versions of reality. And as we do it, that next version could switch it back, or that next version could switch it to something. Who knows? In 6 months from now, Dolly may have her braces back. Who knows?
This is true. See, personally, I've never, until recently, I had a very humbling moment, and I'll share with you in a second, but I've never really been on the whole reality shift train. It is the most accepted theory. It's probably the biggest hit video I've got on my theory series. But I always thought it was ridiculous at best. It just makes us sound kind of ignorant. Let's be honest. We're shifting between realities. Yeah, right. You know.
Mhm.
So I never really liked it until the Victoria's Secret flip flop. That one there, I said, no, that's too close to apostrophe S, and the next word starts with S. That's just, I can't really be 100% on that. That's just too close to a sound thing. And then a couple of days later, the apostrophe S reappeared, and I went, shit, now I have to reevaluate everything. So it really humbled me, truth be told, that I called it out. I said, no, not that I don't believe other people's opinions, but to me, that's just not. And then it flips back to what everybody said. Okay, now I have to take shifting into consideration a little bit more than I did.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's part of the process is coming to understand and accept what is. And part of what is with whatever this thing is I truly believe shifting is real. And I'm glad you've come to the conclusion yourself. That's good. And it takes something to really jar you for shifting. So anyway.
It really does. It does something that just slaps you in the face and makes you go back and reread all your research and look at it through a whole new pair of eyes.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this, and I touched on this briefly before we got online. One thing that never made sense to me with all the changes, and not that the changes make a whole lot of sense at all yet. I say yeah because eventually I feel we can figure this out. But one thing that just seemed out of place to me was the Bible changes. What is your opinion on that, real quick, for the audience?
Sure. The Bible changes. I think that the Christian Mandela Effect community is incredibly sincere. They're incredibly passionate, and obviously, I think they're being incredibly honest. And some of the reactions they have are, of preachers breaking down and weeping, or people becoming very, animated and upset. I believe that those are not staged, and I don't think they're staged for clicks. I think these are people who are something that is very core to their belief system is changing them. And I think that the Bible changes ensure that, one, you take it seriously. Two, you're going to get a demographic you normally wouldn't get. And finally, it could play into it kind of plays into sort of the core history and the core way spirituality is interwoven into this in so many different ways. And I think that Christians, they have a lot of great arguments for the Mandela effect being in the Bible. And, a lot of them are into end time prophecy and things of that nature. And I think that, yeah, it's something that's incredibly jarring to me. I'm, the lion in the lamb thing, really, that freaked me out. And I'm not a regular Bible reader, but I know people who are. And for one, I know someone who's getting a PhD in divinity, and this tripped him up, and it trips people up, and it's real. So that's sort of where I stand on it. I don't think the Mandela effect is just biblical. I think it's just a component of the Mandela effect, and I think it shows the seriousness of it, because regardless of what you think about Christians and Christianity, these are people who are honest in their faith, and I believe that they're sincere. And I believe the sincerity is there, and I believe it's real. And you're messing with something very serious for people. You're touching the third rail in someone's life that you shouldn't be touching. So that just lets you know how serious what you're dealing with. So that's my approach to it.
Gotcha. I appreciate you sharing that with us and the honesty behind that. Personally, I had studied the Bible off and on. I'm not a scholar by no means whatsoever, and I do take a lot of the word from the Mandela Effect Christian community. And like you said, they are very sincere. When they say something, they're passionate about it. They're sincere about it. They really know and mean what they say. And it's people like that that really make me take their word for things when they're sure, that's sure of something. The wolf and the lamb and the lion and the lamb. I'm Darkwolf. If that had said wolf, if anybody would have known that it said wolf, it'd have been me.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely.
So that one bothers me. I've done a little study in the last couple of weeks looking into the Bible changes and through Bill Bean, who's a great researcher, if you ever get a chance to look into him. Anyway, I've been looking into a lot of that research, and I found that every word in the Bible, weird pattern I've come across, when there's a change, like the word on, every time is changed to in. The word awesome is always changed to dreadful or terrible, same meaning there. There's always a standard, like one word change. It's not like awesome's changing to bad, weird, good, weird, whatever other words. It's always changed to the same word when there's a word change in the Bible. And I found that intriguing, almost a pattern there.
Yeah, and it seems to be interesting that it's systematic with the Bible, almost as if there's an attack on the Bible itself. And I'll grant that absolutely, because I haven't seen a lot of other spiritual communities as rattled, and that may be because I'm Western centric. I'm in the West, particularly in America, where it's primarily some flavor of Christian. So it may be that. But I certainly, if other, if other sacred texts are changing, certainly I would love to hear about that, to see if it's more than just the biblical changes. But that's going to be hard because I'm in a nation that's well over 90% Christian or something like that. I don't know what the stats are, but it's incredibly high. And myself too, I was baptized. So I understand. I absolutely understand. But I don't know. It's really systematic with that book. And it may also be that the book is studied constantly. So any shift or any movement is going to be picked up by a lot of people. I mean, and like no other book is it studied. So other books may be changing as well, but no one reads, you know, something from Edgar Allan Poe every single day, 3-4 times a day. People do that with the Bible. The Bible is more than a book. It's much more than a book. So it's many things. The Bible, is a machine, and it teleports you to where you need to go. It's a powerful tool. It's incredibly powerful, and it's a philosophic machine. And it also, too, the debate I see within the Christian Mandela effect community of is what the Word of God means. Is the Word of God the Word of God, or is the Word of God in the Bible, and the Bible itself is the embodiment of that word? And by that word changing, you're either saying blasphemous things, or the word itself is changing. And I've heard one person saying that it's that period before, the end, where the Word of God is removed, and no one will have access to the Word of God. And so I don't know if it's any of those things. Could be.
For my people die from lack of knowledge. Yes.
Right.
I've heard a lot of different theories on that. Again, I'm not 100% on most of the Bible changes, but I find it so intriguing. It's almost, to me, sometimes like I had this theory a while back, and it goes back to the entity theory. I had this theory that perhaps a time traveler, if you want to go down that road, which that's another one I'm not huge on, but say a time traveler was traveling through time and something happened, he got stuck just outside of real time, just outside of reality, where he could manipulate things and send a message across. And yeah, that's about as far-fetched as a sci-fi movie, but go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I was agreeing, like I'm into what you were saying. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So following that theory, again, the Bible seemed out of place for me. If there is a pattern there, it literally could be a message coming through from outside of normal space-time, if you will, from a lost traveler or whatever it may be. This is just a theory I kind of worked with a while back.
I think that's pretty valid. And I think that is absolutely, and that can sync up with a lot of really great things, what you're talking about. And you say sci-fi, but that's probably one of the more plausible ones. Certainly it's more plausible than brains floating out and forming out in the middle of space. I mean, it's way more and the time travel thing, I don't believe in linear time, but I do believe that if you make a change and it ripples through sort of like an earthquake, I do believe that that's how that it would be experienced in time. And I also think that's part of the Mandela effect. And I think, like you're saying, if you're just outside of the present, like just outside of it, you would have the ability to virtually change everything in reality, particularly if it's man-made. Like a word, the written word, any kind of books, any kind of history alluding to books or anything like that, uh, anything. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think it's that far-fetched what you're talking about.
I appreciate that. I really do. I kind of, like I said, in the beginning, I thought it was a little out there, but you kind of started convincing me it might not be all that much after all. That's something I've been working on for a while, though. And again, with this message theory, and that there's actually a message in all the changes, and we're just not picking it up because we're finding all the pieces out of order. It's like trying to put a puzzle together when you're picking up pieces from across the entire living room floor.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And it's really hard to figure out which ones came first and which ones just landed there. It's really hard to put all that information together.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you about this, and this is off topic, out of the not even in the book here that I've got written down. Something that's dawned on me, and I've been talking about this for a couple of days. Last 2 weeks, science, who personally I build a lot of my work off scientism and science. I know it's not your favorite thing, but I try to marry the paranormal and science. So, in the last 2 weeks, here's two of the biggest news articles we've had in science. About 2.5 weeks ago, we had a brand new magnetic field discovered around the Earth. Okay, fine. Maybe it's new. Maybe you missed it. I'll give you one. Then a couple of days ago, we had brand new DNA discovered by scientists. Oops, we just kind of missed it this whole time. Have you heard about these?
No, that's typical though. I can't say I'm not surprised. I used to be into scientism and I loved science and I just I'm a computer guy, so I loved anything STEM. And I don't bother with it anymore. Like I said, if you really do an analysis of a lot of things, look at the wording they use in all the science articles. They say could be or would or possibly or could. And when you really read the article itself, it really is telling you nothing. It's really telling you a tale. It's sci-fi.
It
This
possibly
happens
could be maybe this.
and right. So you're really reading nothing. And in terms of them making these new discoveries, it just adds to my argument that, think before they discovered this new DNA that could unlock all kinds of things. They were convinced DNA was done and this is it. And that's it. And there's no arguing this. And it's over. And that's the thing about scientism is it's kind of arrogant in that once it says this is settled science, all you're going to get from anyone is a scoff. And the problem is nothing is absolutely settled. They still can't describe gravity properly. So, even that's a theory. So yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're just as studied as I am as far as that goes. You're right. They can't even discover or explain gravity away. I love that.
Yeah.
And this is what I was getting at. Sounds like they're being trying to explain things away, is what Martha Jane said in chat. By the way, you've got a lot of fans in chat, so a lot of people were looking forward to this today.
Oh, good. Excellent. That's wonderful. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming.
There you go, guys. Hellos directly from SMQ. I know some of you are right now like grinning ear to ear. Uh, so it seems to me, and this is again a theory I've got. It's nothing. It's just conjecture. If science were to start finding Mandela effects before we did, say a new magnetic field or new DNA all of a sudden, they would want to put that out as a scientific discovery so we didn't find it first and go, hey, look, we got something. Oh, no, it's a discovery. Didn't you read that? It's science. You know what I mean?
I'm not entirely I wouldn't put it beyond the scientific community, given that it's really mostly a political apparatus and a commercial apparatus, that they don't have white papers already written. In computer science, they have these things called white papers. And what they are is really boring technical jargon that you go to read on a particular piece of software or coding software. I've had to write articles for it. It's really boring and dull. But basically what it is it's sort of for the people that are in the industry and the people that are going to use the software. I would bet that they're either top secret or something like that. They already have white papers on something like this. They probably have gone way farther than we all have in understanding the shifts, the Mandela effect, the nature of quantum reality. They probably already have all of this. And whenever they go to introduce it, they'll probably find some obscure place where they say it was always there, and some obscure professor at some obscure place, a think tank in DC that had been talking about it since 1976. I can assure you that if that is the case, we were ignorant because they've already talked about all this, and that's a real thing. So yeah, I totally believe that if they finally, come forward and be forward about it, that's the way that they're going to do it. That it's already done. The paper's out there, and if you were just too ignorant to find the paper, sorry.
Yeah, that sounds like a scientism move if I've ever heard one. But I just
Yes.
couldn't help but think, and these big brand new discoveries, those are pretty huge discoveries to come out that close together. It really threw me off for a minute.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, so I want to get into the pretty much the last part of our questions, and we'll start to wrap things up, and I've got a couple more specific questions I want to ask you. But explain to our audience, and Chick just come up with this language yesterday, but explain to our audience what a quantum storm is, and I want to get more deep into this thought pattern also.
Yeah, well, what Chick and I were talking about yesterday was trying to build something that's sort of like a weather forecast. Like, for instance, with the quantum storm, would be this idea that we're going into an age, kind of an age of quarrel. We're all quarreling right now, even in your and sure, it's in the Mandela effect community, but I'm having people on Twitter telling me in their personal lives they're getting into arguments with complete strangers. People are tense and they're upset. That can be sort of our storm, and we could develop language that has different, like, almost weather patterns. And right now we would be in that storm, and that would be something that we could add on to the language that we're having. And by doing that, talking about it as a quantum storm, we could say a shift caused this. We're in a period of quarreling. Then we'll all perhaps be able to have a tool to step back from the emotional side of it and say, not only with us, the way we feel inside, we can recognize that, but also too, if things are out of place or things are not going so well, it's all around me. I don't know about you, but me in my personal life, it's all around me. Things are changing. They're very abrupt. And I'm a little just worried, not like for the end of the world kind of worried, but just the day-to-day worried. And I just, giving it a label, giving it a name so we understand it is a very powerful tool. So that's sort of what we were talking about.
And I love that you did that because, like I had said, I can't remember if I said it earlier in the broadcast when we were offline, but I had actually started talking about this on another live stream, a couple of the live streams this past week, about how I want to put together a way to forecast a shift. We don't have any kind of idea right now. We've been so caught up for so long in that change and this change and that change and this change. It seems like I've been the only one for the last year that's been focused primarily on theories. And I kind of put a call out there. Hey guys, what I want you to do is every time you think there's a shift, mark it down. Don't say anything, just mark it down. And then we can all come together, compare notes and go, oh, okay, on the 29th, we all agree there was a shift. There was something here. On the 31st, we agree there was a shift. Okay, there was something here. We can actually start putting stuff together here.
Yeah, that's remarkable because one of the things I like about the Lost and Found bin, I do exactly that. And then I won't say anything to her and she'll bring it up. And she'll bring up there was a shift this week and X, Y, and Z is happening. And for me, it's personal validation that, yes, this is indeed what I'm experiencing and indeed what's happening. And, to me, just in my own selfish way of I need this confirmed, it helps me. So what you're talking about absolutely is a great idea.
Let me ask you, because it looks like you've done just a hair more research than I have in this field. In your or as far as the quantum storm field goes, in your opinion, how long does a shift take?
See, that's just it. To me, it seems like there was a period where it seems like they ramped up, and it was somewhere around. It felt to me around 72 hours. Now, I'm just throwing that out for one that I was really aware of personally, but it seems to me it's by the time a shift has occurred, by the time that Chick and I have talked from a Saturday to a Saturday, if a shift has occurred, it has days and days to settle in. So we're still talking about maybe a day, 2 days, three at the most, somewhere in that time frame. And please, there's no, I'm not saying you have to believe me or you have to, agree with me. I'm just
Right.
saying from my own observations that could be the case.
And that was exactly the question, in your opinion or from your observations. But yeah, so well put. Have you been able to find a pattern, specific pattern in whether the timing of the shifts or anything to that nature?
Nope, nothing yet. The only thing is the afterwards is so far. I would love to get to where we can either predict or we could talk about are things in the world ramping up to that change. That's the next step. Right now, we're all getting our arms around the themes of the changes and how the changes are affecting us and our life. This last one was very potent and very powerful, and it was easy for everyone to see that everyone's things are changing in a negative way. It was a more of a negative shift this last one, and I think it was pretty easy. And we had gone far enough in our vocabulary that we could easily communicate that to one another, and we understood that. So that alone, even though it was a negative shift, it showed that this was a potent one and it was negative. So that's good.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, definitely. There was one more on here I wanted to ask before I kind of broke off into the next topic. Oh, have you noticed? So in 2008, before I ever knew the Mandela effect or anything like that, back when the sci-fi was still sci-fi, if you will, um, I woke up one day and I went to hang out with this group of friends that I literally grew up with. Okay, these are like my brothers. We considered ourselves a brotherhood. We were just that close every day together. I know these people better than they know themselves. So um, I woke up one day and I'd go hang out with them, and it was like they played musical personalities. They were the exact same people, same memory, same everything, but their personalities did not match them. It's like they all switched up. And for about 6 months, I walked around talking about, well, I feel like I woke up in a parallel universe, and everybody kind of laughed at me, whatever. Well, another 6 months after that, so we've gone a year now from the first incident. One of the guys who's like a brother to me, he said, man, can I ask you, can I tell you something? Well, yeah, you know, you tell me anything. It's like I woke up the other day and everybody's the same, but they're different. I was like, aha, I'm not the only one. But I've been noticing this back in '08, and I'm leading up to something with this. Have you noticed people's personality literally shift overnight?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I have noticed that, and more disturbing with me, I've noticed myself, some of my appetites and things like that have changed and shifted myself. And I brought up that Butterfinger one. It seems, kind of a surface thing, but I never cared for Butterfingers. So that isn't me, but yet it is me now. So it's yes, there are people that I've noticed their personalities changed overnight and they become different people completely. And also too, now to go a step farther, I've noticed myself, my body has changed enough, and it may not be a personality thing, but it sort of is, um, that I have this appetite and a craving for that. And it's odd. And people noticed. People have noticed. They've noticed. So in that way, they're Mandela affected and they don't know it. So absolutely, I have noticed personality changes. I think that's real.
And it's funny because when I wrote that question, and even when I was asking it, I completely forgot about the Butterfingers, which are one of my favorites and always have been, by the way. But when
Oh
you
yeah.
said you suddenly, how long ago was that? Can you tell us a little bit about the Butterfinger incident, if you will?
Sure. It's maybe 2 weeks or so, I'd say. It may be 3 weeks now. And that's the problem is I didn't recognize what it was because we hadn't gotten to that level. Of course, now if suddenly I want to eat Twinkies all the time, I'll notice that obviously the day of, and I'll write that down. But that's the problem is I didn't have the language. I didn't have a template. I didn't realize that I will eat 4 Butterfingers a day for 2 weeks straight. I didn't know it was going to do that. So anyway.
Right. And you didn't eat Butterfingers before, like this just come out of the blue for you?
I may have, and I'm not exaggerating, I may have had 2 or 3 Butterfingers my entire life before that. Seriously. I mean, it was not at all anything because the problem with Butterfingers over other one, it gets stuck to your teeth, so it's kind of a pain. And if
Mm,
you're in the middle of eating something and you're trying to talk to a coworker, it's kind of gross versus, if you take like a Three Musketeers or a Snickers, you can get it down and it's over with. But a Butterfinger, that's a process, man.
right. Yeah, that peanut butter, the way they form it, it really sticks to it. It don't matter what kind of dental work you have either. It's sticking.
Yep.
Let me ask you, uh, back about a year ago when you were doing the 2012 series, the We Died in 2012 series, um, you had that big bear head, and I haven't really seen it in any of your videos in the last quite a while. Are you going to bring that back, or what was that about?
Yeah, the thing about that is, there is an independent movie that's completed, and that will be showing June 10th in Ottawa, Canada. And anybody's wondering, I can get them the information if they want to hear more about it. But it'll be the Mandela Effect movie. Now, this isn't the large Hollywood production. This was an independent film, and they took sequences from my original stuff from the We Died in 2012 series, and also my Scare Bear is what it was dubbed, the bear. They took video from that, and also I shot extra footage for them, and I gave them extra pieces of audio and things like that for them. And yeah, they've incorporated it into the movie, and so I'm in that movie. I'll get some credit in that movie, and that'll be really a great thing. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope everybody, when there's an opportunity for everyone to see it, I'll direct everyone where to go to see it. And if you guys could, support those guys that did the movie. They worked so hard on it. If you could go out and support them and get the movie, that would be really great.
I personally would love to see this. Anything having to do with the Mandela effect, I've become really obsessed, if you can't tell. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I would definitely want the information of how to see that, and I will pass that along on my channel if you would like, and get that out to all my subscribers also.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's the least I could do. Um, Kind of start to wrap things up here. I've run out of questions. Do you have any questions for me you like, or?
Um, you know, uh, for you, how long did you say that you've been ME affected?
So I found it in 2015 when there was like maybe four Mandela effects to be had. The Berenstein Bears. I was watching Mikey Chen's Beyond Science, and he had the very end of his video. He said something about a lot of people remember the Berenstain Bears with an E. I went, no. Love your work. You've got everything right so far, but you're wrong. Can't wait to write this correction email. And I go to look in. It'll take me 2 minutes to find this. That was 3 years ago. I'm still looking.
Oh. And for you in your personal life, are you or did you notice? Well, you obviously brought up the 2008, but since you've dubbed it, since you've now have a label for it, a category, have you noticed that people are changing and have in personal Mandela effects? Have those ramped up in your life?
Man, I'm glad you asked me that. So, yes, personal Mandela effects and synchronicities have become off the wall for me. Not so much as they were before I found the Mandela effect, ironically enough, because it used to be like by the minute. And
Wow.
I'm not even exaggerating. It's become a little less than that now, but it'll kind of be sporadic, happening almost like waves, if you will. I might be able to sync it up, but it's a lot more personal things now. Like I was watching this trailer of movies and had the trailer for the Mandela Effect movie, and then I had a trailer for a movie that was like directly related to something that I live literally next door to. Like the name of the title had something to do with something I live literally next door to. Within a couple hours, I start watching this TV show, and the specific people who own my job, the last name was mentioned in that, and then uh, Ernest Hemingway is a thing where I live. He's actually buried where I live. So the very next episode, they're running around with Ernest Hemingway. It's a time travel show. So I mean, like all these synchronicities within maybe 2 hours of each other. You know what I mean?
That's amazing. That's great stuff. See, that's important. That's important stuff you're talking about.
Appreciate that. And number synchronicities. I have three number syncs, and this only ones I have. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 11, and of course the infamous 11, 11. There is. You mentioned earlier you have some. Do you have any ones that are like absolute every time number syncs?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 222. I get tons of 222, and I do get 911, which is a little disturbing. I do get that quite a bit, and
Right.
then I get 777, but I get all kinds though. But those are the three that you're like, oh, come on, I get this all the time. Yep.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me ask you this. This is kind of off topic, but do you know what a sigil is first?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you have any sigils that show up just everywhere you go for you?
I mean, I know what a sigil is, and whenever I've marked sigils, I mean they're in corporate logos. So in terms of repeating sigils, I mean I don't I don't in terms of like a homemade one that someone's doing when they're doing like magic or something. No, I don't see any repeating sigils like that. But in terms of like logos, in terms of the more subtle kind of sigils that the corporate world uses, yeah, I always see those constantly. Yeah, they're always popping up because that is sigil magic they're using on you. So yeah.
Right. See, everywhere I've gone for the last, God, I can't even count the years, probably most of my life, I see a heart, the traditional heart shape.
Uh-huh.
Whether it's ingrained in a wall, on a rock, a stain in a carpet, it's just random as can be. But the heart will show up in the sky in clouds. Like it'll show up randomly for me at least once a day.
Oh wow, that's great. Yeah, you know what? I'll try to do that, like shapes and things like that. I'll try to start paying attention to that. Sure, because I was thinking of the more hard sigil magic, like chaos magic sigil stuff. But yeah, okay, yeah, I'll definitely start paying attention to that. Sure,
If you do find a pattern that, I would love to hear back from you about that.
absolutely.
So, starting to wrap down here, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to add? Any ideas, theories, anything?
Uh, just other than the plug, please come and check out Chicken myself. The check out the bin, I call it. The Lost and Found bin. It's 2 o'clock Eastern on Saturdays, and then I'm on tonight every Sunday night at 6 o'clock Eastern. And you can come. The best way to like talk to me like one on one is my Twitter handle, and that's AI_SMQ. Um, if you get on Twitter and let me know who you are and how you found me, I'll follow you back and then we can DM together. And, I'm just really open to it and interested in anybody who's got an ME story. So that's really about it.
Appreciate it. And it really means a lot to have you here. Guys, go check his channel out. Check out Chick's channel. Check out the Lost and Found band. It is absolutely incredible. I really, really like Chick's. Her accent, man. I know you've asked her multiple times, but her accent is just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She's really great and very she's able to pick out something and sort of illuminate it for everyone, including myself. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is great here. So oftentimes I feel like I'm just trying to keep up.
Again, if you would please ask her about a interview. I really want to get her on here too. I think that would be great, and the both of you, that'd be even better.
Okay. I mean, I'll ask.
So, because I mean, I could probably ask her, but I think you would get a quicker response than I would. Truth be told.
Mhm.
Uh, um, one more thing, but this is more conjecture than a question. A while back, Chicken and a couple other people said they remember your name originally being SMQ without the AI. I have to say, in the very beginning, I also remember it being without the AI because I thought, oh, wow, after a little while, he added the AI to it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's one that, people have brought up to me, and the my only and it could be an ME, it absolutely could, but there's already a channel called SMQ, and I think he rides dirt bikes. So we would have, it would be competing. And I specifically remember doing SMQ AI because it looked cool, it sounded cool, and I just the AI was always there. Now, that's not the case with my Twitter handle, but everyone's already told me to stop. It's not the case. So I totally, I get it. So the only thing I can come up with is, yeah, it's possible it was a Mandela effect. It may have came around sometime when I started to love Butterfingers. I'm not entirely sure.
It changed like shortly to me right after you started doing the We Died in 2012 series. It like a couple of videos in, it just kind of the AI was there. I thought, huh, he added to it. That's kind of cool.
That's so strange. Yeah. Yeah. To this, it's a head scratcher for me, but I absolutely believe that because of the Mandela effect, I wouldn't be a very good ME person if I didn't respect and understand that. I totally believe it. It's absolutely, it changed. Sure. I trust and believe that. Absolutely.
And you're the only one that's ever happened to me with. I'm kind of another thing I'm kind of scoffed at every now and again because it don't take nothing to change your YouTube name. You do it once every 6 months. So
Yep.
so for a creator to kind of mix it up a little bit and change it without saying nothing, that's not going to surprise me. Now, if it starts happening every couple of weeks, I'm be like, oh, well, wait a minute, you can't do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, right, right. Yep. And that's interesting because if you listen to my video that went viral, my second video, I say this is SMQ AI. So that's, I tried to refer to that, but everyone was not, they were having none of that. They didn't want to hear that. So I was like, okay, it must have changed. And I just didn't know. It was an ME, I guess.
I would call that one an ME if you didn't do it and weren't aware of it, and which you clearly weren't, because I remember when it's brought up to you, you were quite mind boggled and baffled over it.
I just thought people were confused, and then I realized what I was doing. I was doing what people, do to me when I bring up an ME, and I said I told myself stop. That you need to believe and listen, and don't do what you people do to you. So I was like, okay, and I said yep, and I accept it.
And then I thought that was really cool too, because the fact that you can step back and we'll wrap this up here real quick, but the fact that you can step back and see those type of things and become very self-aware, I think that is really neat because I pride myself in my self-awareness also.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool stuff. Yeah, it just shows that you're just you're mature and you understand what's what. So it's important.
Um, if you would like to get together again and do another show, I would be more than honored. I'd have to make up a whole nother list of questions, but if you'd like to come back, just let me know. We'd be glad to have you back on here.
All right. Well, I appreciate everything, and thank you for your time, and thank you everybody who showed in the chat. I thank you very much.
I want to thank the chat. I want to thank SMQ personally. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have him here. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Dark Wolf's Den, and I'm going to close it out like I always do. Remember, guys, stay awake, but dare to dream. Bye, everybody.